rewarding because you get to see a lot of details and color variations and things that make the painting a lot more interesting. But if I went and did this for every building in this whole city, it would take forever. And you get diminishing returns as you get further back. Like, we don't need to see inside of these little windows in the far background. We just need to see a hint of light and some color variation. So the way that we're going to approach this is in a couple different ways, and I'll show you a couple techniques that'll speed up the lighting process. So I'm going to start with this mid-ground building over here. And I'm going to take our original image, merge it down, hit Control-I to invert it, create a levels adjustment, and just get those mid-tones all the way down and get the brights of those windows pumped up. I'm also just going to mask out these different pieces of architecture that are being lit up so that we just have the windows lit up. And now we can set this to screen and just color correct it down until we're not getting anything from those shadows and we're just getting those highlights. So there you can see we're getting a good start. I'm going to create another levels adjustment just because our windows are getting a little too hot in the bottom. And you can see just just what was in our original plate. We're getting nice variation. And now if I turn on these other lights, you're seeing we're getting something close. We'll probably want to do a little extra masking just to break up the windows, because right now almost all the window lights are on. So I'll just go in here and take out a couple randomly here and there. I'm trying not to think when I'm doing this. I'm just doing it fast and mindlessly to avoid those patterns. So something like that. And then we want to get a little bit of color variation in here as well. So I'm just going to go to that mid-ground building that we did. And I'm going to grab those windows. I'm going to bring it down. And I'm just going to do a soft light on here. And that just gives us a little bit of color variation. Enough to sell through that there's something in the interior. Then the last thing I can do is create my soft light layer and just pump up windows where I want it a little brighter. And maybe darken a couple just randomly. And that quickly, we just have that facade lit up. And I'll just make those lights a little cooler. And there we go. And this works for all of these background buildings as long as you have dark windows. You know, when you get to like a building like this deep background one, it gets a little more complicated. It's the same process, but it just takes a little more work to get that breakup in there. So I'll grab this original image and I'll invert it. Again, levels adjustment. Set that to screen. Maybe take down the saturation a bit. You know, that's not quite getting us there. And to paint out a ton of those different little windows is just going to be too big of a pain. So that's why we go back and use some of our other window layouts. And we just use those to break up those lights. I can even just set this to multiply. Now let's try soft light. Play with a couple different things. And then you might need to do a color correction on top of that. Get rid of some of these are a little too bright over here. So I'll just use the, let's see if that's coming from our texture, or that's coming from the actual image. So we might just want to do like a little mask. Take those out. Or even, again, using our clone tool. Just to give it something. Just a little more color correction. And I'm not naming these like right now. I'll go back and name them. I just want to get through a lot in this lesson. So I'm naming them behind the scenes. So something like that gets you those lights pretty quickly. Now another way to handle this when you get into the very deep background. So you have your flip your original image and screen it on top and color correct. Then you have your flip your original image, screen it on top, and then use just window patterns to just break it up a bit and give it color variation. And then the third way to handle these deep background ones is to just grab a city skyline. So I have like this reference right here. And I can just take this, and it has a ton of lights in it. And you know, back here, we're not getting a lot of detail in these deep background mountains, or deep background city. So what I'll do is first duplicate our original, control click it, create a group, and mask it, and delete that. So now we just, our lights are contained to those buildings. Then I can just scale down these lights and get them roughly that's like a happy accident right there of getting that pillar lined up. But just get buildings in there and roughly at the scale of your lights. And the scale is one of the big things, because these lights, all of a sudden this flat city has human scale to it. And especially with these far background buildings, if I just set this to screen and do a levels adjustment on it, and just take down the saturation, you can see the difference in scale of when I have our lights that big versus that big. All of a sudden this building becomes so much bigger. And so that's something that we want to use. We want to use these lights as a way to create scale. And I'll just go in, especially with this background stuff that you don't really see that many details in. You can really go in with the clone tool and detail this stuff out. You can also, create multiple copies of this image. And I'll just copy these color corrections over. And you can just layer them up. And then go in here and extend it where you want it extended. Again, a lot of this stuff is covered up, so we just want lights to be shining through behind buildings. And we'll just duplicate this whole process over and over until we just cover the skyline with lights. And you may, if you're getting little details in those buildings, you may just want to adjust the perspective or skew it just a little bit. But yeah, that's how you add background lights, and it's a lot faster. It does get a little messy, so that's why we don't want to use it for these foreground buildings. But for these background buildings, it's more than fine. And the more time you do spend refining this and lining up your windows, the better it'll look, the more detailed it'll be, but it gets you a quick result. So once we get all these lights in, the next thing is to add atmospheric lights, and that'll also kind of bleed these different lights together and let them sit together much better.